Okay, so you want to own a nightclub. Picture it. The rope drops for you, a bottle arrives at your corner table with a sparkler wedged in the neck, and for about 4 hours a 26-year-old bartender and a private equity partner are nodding along to the exact same song. That's the fantasy. It's a good one. Here's the version nobody puts in the listing. It's 1:47 a.m. on a Saturday, the walk-in cooler just died, the headline DJ's rider cost more than your monthly rent, and a promoter is texting you about a guest list dispute that's somehow your problem now. The United States nightclub industry pulls in somewhere between $25 and $27 billion a year, according to Ibis World, and the typical club nets only a few cents on every dollar that crosses the bar. That gap is not an accident. It's the entire business model. So here's the one question this breakdown answers. Who gets paid first when that room is full? Because the honest answer has almost nothing to do with the bottle you're about to sell at a markup that would embarrass a jeweler. And there's a version of this business where the club itself barely matters at all, which we'll get to later because that's where an enormous amount of the real money hides. A nightclub is not one business. It's 3 doors you can walk through, and almost nobody explains the difference before the lease gets signed. Door 1 is the street club, a cover charge at the door, meaning a flat admission fee separate from anything you buy once inside, cheap rail drinks, and a promoter culture built entirely on volume, more bodies, more cover, more bar rings. Door 2 is the bottle service lounge, the version most people actually picture when they say the word nightclub. Reserved tables, a table minimum, meaning the guaranteed dollar amount a group must spend to hold that table for the night, and a room engineered around visibility and status rather than the dance floor itself. Door 3 is the branded mega venue, a Las Vegas-scale room built inside a casino resort, or one outlet of a much larger multi-city hospitality group, where a single club is really just a storefront for something bigger. This breakdown follows Door 2 because it's the version most aspiring owners actually chase, with Door 3 waiting in the wings for later, because that's where the real wealth mechanism in this business turns out to be hiding, and it has almost nothing to do with how good your Saturday night looks. Here's where it gets interesting before you've spent a single dollar. The door you pick doesn't just change your decor, it changes your entire cost structure, your entire promoter relationship, and, as you're about to see, your entire exposure to the one piece of paper that can outlive the business built on top of it. You found the space, you signed the letter of intent, you think you own a nightclub. What you actually own is an empty room with a lease attached to it, and before that room produces a single dollar, 4 separate bills have to clear. First, the liquor license. And this is where the geography of the business gets genuinely strange. In New York City, the state license fee itself is only around $4,459 a year, according to the New York State Liquor Authority. Sounds almost reasonable. But once you add the attorney fees, the expediting service, and the architectural sign-off a contested application usually needs, a realistic first-year cost in Manhattan runs somewhere between $30,000 and $50,000. And in neighborhoods like Soho or Tribeca, an existing license can carry a transfer premium of $50,000 to $150,000 on top of that, just to buy someone else's paperwork. Now go to California, where the state caps the number of full liquor licenses per county, a system called a quota, meaning only a fixed number exists at any time, so a new operator can't apply for one directly, only buy one from someone who already has it. According to California's Department of Alcoholic Beverage Control licensing rules, that resale price runs somewhere between $12,000 and $400,000, depending entirely on which county you're standing in. Read that again. The exact same piece of paper, $400,000 apart, and it has nothing to do with your business plan. Second, the build-out. Sound and lighting alone runs somewhere between $75,000 and $150,000 for a serious room, and that's before you've touched a single wall. Third, construction, furniture, and equipment, the full build-out for a mid-size venue lands somewhere between $240,000 and $840,000 depending on how much of the space you're gutting. Fourth, the opening cash reserve, the money that keeps the lights on before a single regular has found you, and any operator who skips this step is the same operator who closes within the year. Added up, and a modest bottle service lounge can eat well past $1 million before opening night, and that's before you've paid a single promoter, poured a single well drink, or found out what the building inspector actually thinks of your ceiling. Here's the trap, and it's not the rent. Every month, 4 separate bills arrive whether or not anyone shows up on a Tuesday. Labor runs somewhere between $10,000 and $45,000 a month, eating 24 to 40% of sales on its own. Alcohol inventory, what the industry calls pour cost, meaning the cost of the liquor in a drink measured against what that drink actually sells for, runs another 30 to 35% of sales, somewhere between $5,000 and $25,000 a month, depending on how busy the room is. Security and safety staffing adds somewhere between $7,000 and $10,000 a month, non-negotiable in most cities, and liquor liability insurance, which covers what's called dram shop liability, the legal responsibility a venue carries when it keeps serving a visibly intoxicated patron who then hurts someone, runs somewhere between $500 and $8,000 a month, depending on your capacity and your claims history. Layer on to that the federal side of the business. Every ounce of liquor behind your bar is taxed and tracked by the Alcohol and Tobacco Tax and Trade Bureau, the federal agency that regulates and taxes the production and import of everything you pour, and a compliance misstep there can freeze your inventory before a single guest notices anything is wrong. There's also the equipment nobody budgets a real number for, the walk-in cooler, the ice machine, the point-of-sale system, all of it running every single night the club is open, and all of it eventually failing on the one weekend you can least afford it. None of that is the part that actually kills clubs. The part that kills clubs is the building itself. Every nightclub operates under an assembly occupancy classification, the building code category that decides how many people you're legally allowed to pack into that room, and what fire safety systems you're required to install to do it. Get that classification wrong, or renovate without updating it, and you don't get a fine. You get shut down, sometimes permanently, sometimes days before an opening night you already sold 4,000 tickets to. Hold on to that thought, because it's the exact mechanism that ends this story later. Now scale that. A room that looks profitable on a Saturday can be quietly bleeding on a Tuesday, a Wednesday, and a Thursday, and the fixed costs don't care which night it is. So where does the money actually come from? Multiply the hunger for a night out across the whole country and you get real scale. The average American spends somewhere around $164 a year on nightlife specifically, which sounds modest until you remember it's multiplied across roughly 1/3 billion people. First, the cover charge, straightforward, and the smallest piece of the pie. Second, the drinks at the rail, where a poured cocktail can carry a gross margin of up to 85%, better than almost anything sold in a retail store. A grocery store is thrilled to clear 30% gross margin on a bottle of wine. A nightclub clears nearly triple that on the same bottle poured by the ounce, which is exactly why the bar, not the door, is where a well-run room actually survives. Third, and this is the one people picture when they imagine owning a club, bottle service, full bottles sold at a markup instead of individual pours, built entirely around that table minimum from door 2. Fourth, and here's the part almost nobody outside the business understands, a meaningful slice of that bottle service and bar revenue never actually reaches the owner at all. A head promoter, the independent contractor who fills your room in exchange for a negotiated cut instead of a salary, typically takes somewhere between 20 and 35% of everything sold at the bar on a sliding scale that only climbs as the promoter proves they can fill the room, meaning your best performing nights are also the nights you're handing over the largest cut, plus somewhere between $8 and $12 a head for every paying guest a street promoter brings through the door. Fifth, private buyouts, a flat fee to close the entire room to the public for one night. A single corporate buyout on a slow Tuesday can sometimes out-earn an entire ordinary weekend, which is exactly why some owners quietly stop chasing the crowd altogether and start chasing the corporate calendar instead. Sixth, the comp list itself, the curated roster of guests let in free of the cover charge specifically to seed the room with the kind of crowd that makes paying customers want to stay. So far, a nightclub sounds like a machine that prints money every single Friday and Saturday. 6 revenue layers, an 85% margin on a well drink, a room full of people handing over cash. Now, here's the other side of the ledger. A meaningful percentage of nearly every one of those 6 layers was never yours to begin with. Here's the part nobody tells you walking in. The bottle itself was always the bait. The actual product a nightclub sells isn't vodka, it's a reserved seat next to people a stranger wants to be near for one night, and the bottle is just the receipt for that seating chart. That's layer 1 of the reveal, and it's the one most owners eventually figure out on their own. Layer 2 is less obvious, and it's the one that actually decides whether an owner gets rich or just gets tired. The promoter, not the owner, frequently controls the room. A head promoter capturing 20 to 35% of bar sales isn't a vendor. He's effectively a silent partner who never signed the lease, never personally guaranteed the loan, and can walk to a competing venue with your entire crowd the moment a better deal shows up. Ask anyone who's owned a bottle service lounge for more than 18 months and they'll tell you the same thing. The promoter owns the crowd. You just own the furniture. Lose your best promoter to a rival room across town, and you don't just lose a vendor, you lose the exact crowd that made your Saturdays worth owning in the first place, often within a single news cycle of nightlife gossip. And then there's layer 3, the one this whole breakdown has been building toward, the one that answers who actually gets paid when the room is full. The real money in nightlife was never made running one club. It was made by turning a club into a licensable brand and deploying it across dozens of rooms at once. Tao Group Hospitality, which operates more than 80 branded venues across 20 cities, generated approximately $485 million in revenue in a single year, according to Madison Square Garden Entertainment's own corporate disclosures. And in 2023, it sold to Mohari Hospitality for $550 million. That is not nightclub money. That's brand licensing and multi-venue consolidation money frequently built on partnerships with Las Vegas casino resorts, where the club itself functions as a loss leader whose real job is keeping high rollers in the building, and the casino, not the nightlife operator, absorbs the club's risk in exchange for the traffic it generates. One nightclub earns you a Friday night. 80 of them, wearing the same name, earn you an exit. If you want to see what happens when the fantasy collides with the paperwork, look at the Brooklyn Mirage. It was born as the flagship of Avant Gardner, an 80,000-square-foot entertainment complex in East Williamsburg that grew into one of the most celebrated electronic music venues in the country, the kind of room touring DJs built their whole tour around. At its peak in 2023, it posted a $12 million profit year, running roughly 205 events and packing crowds that made it look, on paper, like the exact success story every aspiring owner imagines. Even at that peak, though, the club was carrying debt at a 16.5% interest rate, a rate steep enough that interest payments alone created something close to a $5 million annual deficit, quietly in the background of the best year the venue ever had. Then came the decline. Between 2023 and 2024, the number of shows fell 29%, from 205 events down to 145. Attendance dropped 32%, roughly 22,400 fewer fans through the door. By 2024, the venue was posting a loss north of $9 million. Then came the death, and it happened almost overnight. A $30 million renovation was supposed to reopen the room on May 1st, 2025. It shut down hours before doors were meant to open. The CEO was fired at soundcheck on May 19th. Behind the scenes, New York City's Department of Buildings had issued 109 separate objections across 2 audits. The structure had been classified under that same assembly occupancy category covered earlier, and inspectors found everything from non-compliant exit stairways to a missing automatic sprinkler system to a steel truss that hadn't been built to its own design. By August 2025, Avant Gardner filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy, the part of the law that lets a company reorganize its debt under court supervision instead of shutting down outright, carrying approximately $155.3 million in debt, according to Law 360 Bankruptcy Authority and the U.S. Bankruptcy Court's own filings. And then, the afterlife. In October 2025, demolition began, at a cost of roughly $1.5 million just to tear the place down. The property itself sold in bankruptcy for a minimum of $110 million to an affiliate of Axar Capital Management, a deal a federal judge approved that same October. The Brooklyn Mirage generated $12 million of profit in its best single year and still could not survive its own debt load. The room was never the risk. The paperwork was. So here's the actual answer to the question this whole breakdown opened with: who gets paid first when the room is full? In most cases, it isn't the person whose name is on the lease. Remember that liquor license from the entry cost section, the one that cost $12,000 in one California county and $400,000 in the next? In a quota state, that license is not a cost of doing business. It's a separate, appreciating asset that exists entirely independent of whether the club attached to it ever turns a profit. The paper survives the party. Clubs open and close constantly in a quota market, but the finite pool of licenses circulating underneath them only gets more valuable as the city around it grows and the state refuses to print any more. Someone holding that license through 3 failed clubs can come out ahead of every owner who actually tried to run one. The second mechanism is the one the Tao Group sale already put a number on: consolidation. A single bottle service lounge is a high-risk, low-margin operating business exposed to a fickle crowd, a demanding promoter, and a building inspector who can end the whole thing in an afternoon. 80 branded venues under one company, licensed into casino resorts that absorb the operating risk in exchange for the foot traffic, is a completely different asset, closer to a royalty stream than a bar tab. That's the version of this business that sells for $550 million. The single room you were picturing when this breakdown started almost never does. Picture a mid-size bottle service lounge doing a reasonable Friday and Saturday business and run it through 2 versions of the same year. Rough year. Door and bar revenue lands around $1.8 million. Your head promoter, negotiating from a position of strength because 2 competing rooms opened nearby, takes 35% off the top of bar sales instead of 20%. Insurance renews at the high end of its range after a claim. Labor creeps toward 40% of sales because you're short-staffed and paying overtime. After poor cost, security, insurance, and the promoter's cut, you're left with something close to a $70,000 net profit on nearly $2 million of revenue. Technically positive, barely worth the hours. That's a return so thin that the same money sitting untouched in a high-yield savings account would have earned you more without a single 2 a.m. phone call. Great year. Same room, same address, 1 year later. You've renegotiated the promoter deal down to 20% because your Saturday nights don't need rescuing anymore. Table minimums are up, poor cost is disciplined, and door and bar revenue climbs to $2.4 million. Insurance and security costs stay flat because your claims history is clean. Net profit lands somewhere between $650,000 and $700,000. Notice what didn't change: the address, the capacity, the liquor license sitting quietly in a frame behind the bar. What changed was leverage, yours instead of the promoter's. Rough year to great year, the swing is somewhere between $580,000 and $630,000 on the same address, the same capacity, the same liquor license. Nothing about the room changed. What changed was who was capturing the layers of revenue underneath it. Picture that room one more time. The rope drops, the bottle arrives with its sparkler, and for 4 hours a bartender and a private equity partner nod along to the same song. That part of the fantasy is real, and it will probably happen for you, at least for a while. The bottle was never really the product, the promoter's crowd was never really yours, and the club itself, on its best night, was only ever the visible tip of a business that actually gets built out of paperwork, brand licenses, and a liquor license that outlives every party held under it.